But of course, I want to see Caitlin treated fairly and appropriately in the league. I would say, seems like she can take care of herself. She's a tough player. I think it may be lost on some people who are new to basketball in terms of a little bit of the controversy in the WNBA.
Is her right to a peaceful workplace, a non-hostile work environment, are those rights being violated by the WNBA?
The bombshell that just rocked the basketball world has NBA Commissioner Adam Silver seeing red. And frankly, it's about time someone in power finally said what millions of fans have been shouting for months. But this has gone far beyond bad officiating. We're talking about federal investigations, civil rights violations, and possible congressional probes that could rip apart the very structure of the WNBA.
The Wall Street Journal in this article is calling, or at least saying out loud, that maybe Caitlin Clark's civil rights are actually being violated.
A former White House official has just dropped an absolute nuclear bomb, claiming the WNBA's treatment of Caitlin Clark violates her civil rights and calling for a full federal investigation. When former government insiders start framing a sports story as a civil rights issue, you know the situation has spun completely out of control.
Maybe WNBA leadership should at least have to go sit in front of some people and answer some very uncomfortable questions.
The Wall Street Journal, one of America's most respected publications, has now published an opinion piece essentially urging Congress to investigate Clark's treatment. When the Wall Street Journal starts writing about basketball fouls as a civil rights matter, you've crossed into uncharted territory.
Now, it talks about the fact that Caitlin Clark has basically done for the WNBA what Michael Jordan did for the NBA, right? Instead of protecting its transformative star, the league's leadership ignores the relentless targeting of Miss Clark.
Stephen A. Smith just poured gasoline on the fire, declaring that the government would have a case if it chose to investigate the WNBA's handling of Clark.
They're going to be silent? Now, before you go any further, I'm not here saying that the case will be won by the government if it got to that point or anything like that. I'm saying they have a case.
Smith basically voiced what so many have been thinking. If you flip the races, if white players were systematically targeting the league's only black superstar while referees stood by, there'd be federal investigations launched immediately. The double standard is now so glaring that even mainstream media can't look the other way.
Galvanizing talent that has done wonders for the NBA. If she is seen to be physically getting abused on a basketball court in a way that is such a clear and flagrant discrepancy compared to what happens to others, that man is not going to say something.
But let's step back and look at the evidence that's pushed women's basketball to the brink of a constitutional crisis. The statistical analysis that started this avalanche didn't come from the WNBA. It came from independent analysts who did what the league apparently wouldn't. They actually counted the fouls. And the numbers? Staggering. And frankly, embarrassing for a professional league. Caitlin Clark was flagrantly fouled 6 times in her rookie season, more than most players rack up in their entire careers. And she did it in just 1 year. And those were only the flagrant fouls that were called. Video evidence shows dozens of other moments. Clear fouls, no whistle. Unnecessary contact, no consequences. Aggressive hits that would have brought technicals or ejections for any other superstar. This systematic pattern of differential treatment is exactly the kind of evidence civil rights advocates look for when they're building discrimination cases.
But there's this whole conversation around Caitlin Clark. These women tried to invent this false narrative that the refs actually favor her and officiate her differently, like Angel Reese tried to say it before, and you see it right here. And it feels like the refs in the WNBA buys into it. Like they're like, we're not going to give her calls.
Everyone started calling out WNBA referees directly for their constant missed calls on Clark. When ESPN, a network with broadcast rights and financial ties to the league, publicly criticizes officiating, you know the situation has hit a breaking point. They essentially said what anyone with working eyes could see. The refs were failing Caitlin Clark, and in doing so, failing the league. The most damning proof came from game tape analysis showing a clear pattern of inconsistent officiating, now being examined through a civil rights lens. When other players drove to the basket, they got calls. When Clark drove, she got hammered, no whistle. When others were barely touched beyond the three-point line, they got free throws. When Clark got body checked, shooting a three, somehow nothing. The bias was so blatant that even casual fans started making compilation videos exposing the disparity.
It's insane, and none of that was called. Finally, at the end of the one play, they called the foul because it was like indisputable. I mean, she got whacked on the arm and then gets hit to the ground. But they weren't going to call any of the other fouls leading up to it. I mean, this is what Caitlin Clark is dealing with.
And then came the smoking gun. Clark's own teammate, Sophie Cunningham, going on record to say the league's biggest star simply isn't being protected.
Part of the game, I think the refs had a lot to do with that. It was a build-up for a couple of years now of them just not protecting, the star player of the WNBA. And so at the end of the day, I'm going to protect my teammates. That's what I do. And I'm a team player. So
when your own teammates are calling out the league for failing to protect you, that's not just bad optics. That's potential testimony in a federal discrimination case. Clark herself gave what could become the most critical piece of evidence when she said, "Everybody is physical with me. They get away with things others don't."
Yeah, I think everybody's physical with me. They get away with things that, probably other people don't get away with. And it's tough, but that's just the fact of the matter. Is like, this is a very physical game.
That's not just a frustrated player venting. That's documented, firsthand testimony that civil rights lawyers dream of. Adam Silver knows those words could be read aloud in federal court if this continues. The nuclear moment came when Aja Wilson, a three-time league MVP, openly admitted race plays a huge role in how players are treated in the WNBA. When established stars acknowledge racial dynamics are affecting league officiating, you've moved from a sports controversy into a civil rights crisis. Silver knows the second racial discrimination becomes part of the discussion, it stops being a basketball issue and starts being a federal case. And Silver, normally measured, diplomatic, finally hit his breaking point when he saw federal investigators and congressional representatives circling. His earlier comments about wanting Clark treated fairly now read more like desperate damage control than standard diplomacy. What he really meant was, fix this, now, before Washington starts pulling apart every corner of your league. The truth? This wasn't just about bad whistles hurting Clark. It was about a constitutional crisis that could drag professional sports under federal oversight. Clark brought unprecedented attention. Sold-out arenas, record-smashing TV ratings, media coverage women's basketball had never seen. And all of that momentum is now dangling over a cliff because of a civil rights scandal that could trigger congressional hearings. Silver's frustration boiled over when he admitted societal issues were driving outrage over Clark's treatment. Translation: the racial element of this mess had created a PR nightmare with legal teeth, one the league couldn't afford. The evidence kept mounting. Fans documenting missed calls, analysts breaking down bias frame by frame, even opponents admitting Clark wasn't getting a fair whistle. When Chennedy Carter Hip checked Clark, Silver called it a welcome to the league moment. But the real problem wasn't that foul. It was the pattern of letting those moments pile up without consequence. And then came the stats that truly rattled him. Clark missing 10 games from excessive physical play and ratings nosediving 55% without her on the court.
3 injuries have sidelined her for 10 games and the All-Star game. Ratings plummeted 55%.
The league's most valuable asset was being systematically targeted, injured, sidelined, while building exactly the kind of evidence federal investigators love in discrimination cases. The WNBA's officiating wasn't just making the league look amateur, it was making it look discriminatory. Professional sports live or die on the perception of fairness. If fans believe a superstar is treated differently because of race instead of skill, it destroys more than competitive integrity. It creates legal precedent. The deeper analysts dug, the worse it got. This wasn't just about missed offensive calls. Clark was also being hit with soft fouls on defense, the kind other players got away with. So she was being overpenalized on one end, underprotected on the other. That kind of systemic imbalance is exactly what federal civil rights investigators flag
they're calling out the WNBA and Kathy Engelbert. Why? Because of the officiating.
Silver's anger hit a new level when he realized this civil rights controversy was actively strangling the WNBA's growth. Clark was the golden goose, the ticket seller, the buzz generator, the gateway for new fans. Instead of protecting that investment, refs let her get battered night after night, fueling a civil rights storm that could invite federal oversight into pro basketball. Then came the most explosive revelation. Analysts comparing Clark's treatment to historic civil rights cases in sports. The targeting, the biased whistles, the lack of equal protection. It was a textbook pattern, the kind of thing lawyers can take straight to court. What truly pushed Silver over the edge was realizing this wasn't about basketball anymore, it was about survival. The NBA's investment in the WNBA is huge, but a civil rights scandal could bring government oversight that changes everything. The league's attempts to downplay it, calling it rookie hazing, only made things worse. Federal investigators love that kind of denial. It smells like institutional bias, not random mistakes. And then came the final straw. Silver, seeing the civil rights narrative, pulled this story out of the sports section and into the halls of Congress. Instead of celebrating Clark's record-breaking rookie year, the headlines were about discrimination lawsuits and investigations. So Silver went into panic mode, pressuring WNBA leadership on officiating and warning them about the existential threat of government enforcement. His public "Clark should be treated fairly" lines? Not suggestions, ultimatums. The message was simple: fix this now, or get ready for investigators, congressional hearings, and federal agencies crawling through every file you have. Because when former White House officials are demanding civil rights probes and respected media are calling for congressional action, you're not in sports controversy territory anymore, you're in constitutional law. The evidence is overwhelming, the pattern undeniable, and Adam Silver's patience has erupted into full-blown panic. This WNBA officiating scandal has now drawn in civil rights advocates, federal investigators, and members of Congress, any of whom could fundamentally change the way professional sports are run in America. So now the question is, should federal investigators launch a full civil rights probe into the WNBA's treatment of Caitlin Clark? Or is Adam Silver's behind-the-scenes pressure enough to fix a scandal that's already threatening the league's very survival?